Hello, my name is Logan Beert, and today I will be giving a speech on comprehensive sexual education. Um, Teenagers and adolescents today face a massive contradiction in society. On one end, authority figures and parents teach us that we need to avoid sex at all costs and that it's all evil and abstinence is the only way. On the other hand, however, though, we have media and other sorts of things showing and telling us that sex is the best thing in the world, it's incredible, and that you need to go find it right now. It doesn't take very long for someone to turn on the TV and find a Wendy's ad of someone dressed promiscuously with burger juice dripping down their chin in a very sensual way. But I'm not here to discuss the ethics of a sexual Wendy's commercial. I'm here to explain why I think the South Dakota Board of Regents should include sexual education programs into the high school curriculum. The reasons this are is because it's safer, it improves student happiness and health towards sexual education, it helps prevent rape, and it helps students learn to say no to sexual scenarios they are not comfortable with. Excuse me. So to start, we'll be looking at why sexual education makes students safer. There was a study done in Mexico on the sexual and reproductive health outcomes that are positively associated with comprehensive sexual education exposure in Mexican high school students, and this was done by Felipe de Castro on March 19th of 2018. This study found that students who received comprehensive sexual education had a 53 to 67% self-efficiency condom use. What that means exactly is that they were able to use the condom themselves and safely use it and be able to feel confident about using it and not have to be asked by their partner to have to use one. So that's a pretty good thing, considering that condoms can help prevent pregnancies and unwanted STIs and STDs. So it's good that we help students learn how exactly to use all these different types of protective measures, including birth control and whatever else. That's just one example of a good outcome of comprehensive sexual education. Another measure that's safer, although the percentage is not that high, 20% of students negotiated condom use with their partners before having a sexual encounter, and that's actually a pretty good thing instead of most students who don't fully understand everything that there is to all the different forms of birth controls and what have you, and just ignoring it and hoping for the best. It's favorable that these students are at least asking and saying, hey, I think we should use this, or I'm not going to do anything unless we do. Because what studies have found is comprehensive sex it doesn't encourage sex. Students who learn comprehensive sex and those who don't roughly are having sex at the same rates. Comprehensive sex is just safer, and those who learn it have less STDs and less unwanted teen pregnancies. On a brighter note, though, it does improve your overall sexual happiness and positive feelings towards sex. These students had about an 80 to 97% positive attitudes towards sex and condoms and their use. So that's almost 100% of the students saying, I feel comfortable using a condom, I would know how to, and I feel good about these emotions that I'm feeling, because everybody feels some sort of sexual emotion, and so it's good for them to be able to recognize that instead of shy away from it and repress their own sexuality. And another way that it helps keeping students from repressing their sexualities, not just orientation-wise, but any sort of sexual emotion they're feeling. 47% of students who received comprehensive sexual education had sought counseling on reproductive health. And that's another really good thing for students to seek out and need if they feel that they are needing that. And 47% of the students, a decent chunk of those probably would have never gone out or would have delayed their meeting if they had not received the comprehensive sexual education. Moving down to a slightly darker note, though, it's not a darker note. It's a good thing about comprehensive sexual education is that it helps teach teenagers to say no to unwanted sexual encounters. There was a study done in Kenya called the Self-Defense Program that reduces the Incidents of Sexual Assault in Kenyan Adolescent Girls, posted by Jake Sinclair on January 25th of 2013. And this program had taught Kenyan girls comprehensive sexual education, and because of that, the cases went down from 99 cases a year to 35 cases of sexual assault a year, which is almost 2/3 of the cases being wiped out, which is a really good number to have. Eventually you want to get it down to 0, but considering in a year you got 2/3 down, that's very impressive and very hopeful. Another fact from that study is found boyfriends were the biggest proponents of the sexual assault cases. 12.4% of the cases were from boyfriends, and after this comprehensive sexual education, boyfriends were only the cause of 5% of sexual assaults, which is over half of the cases from boyfriends being cut down. So that's girls going in saying no, they don't like that, or telling them to back off. Another hopeful thing about comprehensive sexual education is that after these Kenyan girls were taught that, 0% of them had hidden their sexual assault experiences, as opposed to the year before, where 35% of them hid they were sexually assaulted for fear of being called a rape or being called a slut or anything else that is associated with being raped and sexually assaulted. So it's good on them to not have to hide their feelings. Now, the next good thing about comprehensive sexual education is that it prevents rape. Now, before this, I want to go into a little bit of a diversion into rape rates in the United States. I looked on neighborhoods.com, and I found that the national average for rape is 0.43 people per 1,000 people. So although that is still fairly high and we'd like it to be 0, that's relatively low compared to Rapid City's rates. Rapid City has over 3 times as many rapes at a rate of 1.3 people per 1,000 people. That is quite a bit higher than the national average, and clearly it's a problem here in Rapid City, South Dakota directly. So how good can comprehensive sexual education help prevent rapes? One study done by Christopher Pepper on how high school sexual education can prevent rape in college found that girls who learn comprehensive sexual education in high school had 50% less assault cases than girls who received minimal or abstinence-only sexual assault. Now, of course, the rape isn't only on the girls who were assaulted, but of course it helps them find ways to beat back an assaulter or be able to get out of a scenario that they feel uncomfortable in, or help them say no if they need to. Now, what my plan exactly for this is to update the health education standards, particularly in the sexual education manner. When I looked at the South Dakota health education standards that were recently updated in 2018, I found that the standards only identify the skills students need to know, but they leave it open on how it's to be taught. Now, the reason they do that is so that teachers can change what they're teaching due to new statistics and new findings in science that are constantly updating and changing, which, if you think about that, that's good. But a student myself, I can tell you that what it really results in is minimal to no teaching on health education in general, really, particularly in sexual health education. I have barely been taught anything, and majority of my peers have as well. And so I believe that what should happen is the standards are updated to feature more of the comprehensive sexual education guidelines, which posted in Sex Health Ed in Schools on 2017 by Lisa Kira had posted that a few of the guidelines were specific behavioral outcomes, individual values, functional and accurate knowledge, promoting healthy decisions, positive health behaviors, and teacher and information planning. So what that is even though teachers may be uncomfortable, which is where they usually are coming from when teaching sexual education, and so they shy away from it, giving them planning and information on how to teach the students will at least give them a road to follow. So even if they're still uncomfortable, they know at least they're teaching the right thing and that it's a guideline to follow. And that's also more individualized for each student, instead of overall just telling everyone abstinence, that's all you should follow, because that clearly hasn't worked. And why I believe this plan will work is that there are multiple cases where comprehensive sexual education has worked. As I mentioned earlier, there's the Kenya study done by Jake Sinclair. Another interesting fact from the Kenyan assault study was that the assaults went down from 25.6% of girls being assaulted, which is nearly a fourth of the population of that town. And the year after comprehensive sexual education was taught, it was brought down to 9.2% of girls being assaulted in that particular town, and that is quite the reduction rate. And considering that the United States, I believe, is between a fourth and a fifth of women being sexually assaulted, we're not that far different from this Kenyan town. And so, for them to be reduced like that, if America were to face a reduction like that, it would be incredible. On a dimmer note, this is a study found in the United Kingdom. The development of contextually relevant sex education by Hildy Lung on February 20th in 2019. It found, well, to give context first, the UK in the 60s had a sexual education program that taught students about all sorts of things. But eventually there were complications between church and the government and the parents, and teaching abstinence only and teaching different things about sex. So ultimately the school said, we're just going to cut it entirely. Now, before they had cut it, the amount of students who had reported having sex were 1 in 10 for both males and females. After the programs were cut, the amount of students who were having sex was 1 in 5 girls had sex, and 1 in 4 boys had sex. That is a 50% increase rate very suddenly in students who are having sex. And so clearly, shying away from sexual education is not the way to go, because it does not help anything. It does not prevent teenage pregnancies. It does not prevent STIs, and it only encourages abstinence only, which is a program that has not worked. So overall, I believe that the education system needs to be updated to include more sexual education for teens who are going to be entering these scenarios soon in their lives as they're becoming adults, and by the time they're graduating, they're nearly 20. They're bound to have some sort of experience, and if they hadn't yet, they are most likely going to face one in their future, and they need to be prepared for that instead of in these scenarios. Thank you.